We're talking about homeopathy today. And with us is Mr. David Shapley. David, would you introduce yourself for us, please?
Hi, thanks for letting me be here. Like she said, my name is David Shapley. I'm a certified classical homeopath in Richardson, Texas, and I specialize in treating people suffering any type of chronic or acute illness, physical, emotional, or mental, with classical homeopathic remedies.
Welcome, everyone. David, please tell us a short story of how you became a homeopath.
Back in 1993, I was a video producer, and it was a very physically challenging job, hauling equipment around and holding cameras for long periods of time. And I developed severe back pain, and it got worse and worse over the course of 3 years. My spine was spasming up every night really bad, and then I finally got sciatica, which is, you know, if anybody's ever had that, it's agonizing. And I was becoming dysfunctional, so I was taking a leave every day to keep myself functioning. I finally got so bad, I went to a doctor to get it checked, and they x-rayed my spine, and they told me that I had degenerative disc disease, and that my spine, the discs in my spine were as bad as a 65-year-old man with arthritis. And they told me I was going to probably be using a wheelchair or walker by the time I was in my 40s, and prescribed for me anti-inflammatories. I asked them, you know, because I've been taking the Aleve for, you know, a year, and my stomach was burning all the time from it. And so I said, but what about the holes that the anti-inflammatories are burning in my stomach? And they said, oh, no problem. We'll just write you prescription strength Tagamet HB. And she gave me some sample packets, and I walked out, and there was a trash can next to the front door of their office. And my mind just said it really can't possibly be that it was meant to be this way. So I threw those boxes in the trash. I went home, called a friend of mine who I had a lot of respect for, an older guy, kind of a father figure. And he told me to go see this old homeopathic practitioner down in the lower Greenville area. And I'd heard this word before in the past with some of my hippie friends many years ago, but I didn't really know what it meant. But I was willing to try anything if it would work. So I went to go see this old guy. He had an office behind his house. We went in. It was set up kind of like more like a counseling center and like a medical clinic. We sat down, and he told me to tell him I had to tell him everything about myself for him to find the correct homeopathic medicine. And that meant I needed to describe all my symptoms. I needed to describe what made me better and worse. I needed to describe my overall mental view of myself and life, and how I interacted with stress and dreams at night, fears, things that made me angry. And after a couple hours, he told me that, you know, you'll see results in about 4 months. Be patient. He gave me the little white sugar pills. And 6 months later, the pain was gone, and I had my life back.
Thank you for sharing that. That is very interesting. That I had sciatica before, and the doctor told me to lie down flat on the floor for a week. And of course, you have to work, so I can't do that. So I went to a physical therapist, and he said I should wear this neck brace and see how it goes. So I wore that for about 1 or 2 days, and then I saw a kinesiologist, my friend, and he said, all of them are my friends, the doctor, the physical therapist, and the kinesiologist. So the kinesiologist said, who gave you that brace? And I said, our friend. And he said, no, the more you put that on, the more your skeleton will get fixed in, you know, and stop moving. So he says, I can fix that. He said, lie down on the massage table. And he went crack, crack, crack. And in 3 meetings, I was able to walk. The reason why I was not able to walk that time, long time, that was about 1996. But the reason why is because I went to a gym and I saw this athlete doing about 100 push-ups a day. I mean, sit-ups a day. And I was doing 20, so I tried increasing it to about 60 a day. So yeah, so I would like to explore that more now that you've said that. But anyway, I have a lot of questions for you. First of all, what is homeopathy in your terms?
In my terms, the hardest thing in describing homeopathy is that in our Western mindset, we haven't been exposed to the kind of thinking that actually is behind homeopathy. So it's hard to find the words that people can relate to. But the best way to, and make it real simple and very understandable, is to understand first that homeopathy is a vitalistic medicine. It is not materialistic. It's holistic, meaning that it's treating the whole being, but it's not treating the whole being with a whole lot of stuff. And just because something's holistic doesn't mean that it's vitalistic. For instance, vitamins and minerals and substance in diet are not vitalistic, in that they're not looking that the cause of the disease is a disturbance in the vital force or the vital breath of the being. So our remedies are working at that level. So we view a disease as being a disturbance in the vital force. It begins there and then ultimately manifests as changes in the form and function of the body that we know as symptoms and pathology. And best way to conceptualize a disease from the homeopathic vitalistic perspective is to just say that there is a distorted sound rising from the life. It's a distorted note, a distorted vibration. And a homeopathic medicine, each substance in nature has its own sound, its own vibration. A bee has a certain vibration. A spider has a certain vibration. A pulsatilla flower has a certain vibration behind its form and function. And these disturbances that are in the vital force will be mirrored by these things in nature that'll have a similar vibration, a similar sound. And when you look at the symptoms a person is having, the pattern of symptoms, it gives you an indication of the kind of sound that's going on behind that problem. And through our provings with the substances and the medicines, we see those same kind of symptoms manifesting, expressing that sound. So when you bring these two similar sounds together, they work in sympathy to each other to cancel each other out. And that allows that block to remove and the life force to flow more whole and more complete, which generates a total healing reaction from the inside out.
Okay. I always wondered what this energetic or energy is that homeopathy is referring to. Is this physical energy? Is this mind energy? I would like to know from you what your perspective is on that.
We can look at some of the ancient philosophies and some of the ancient healing methods to get a clue. You've heard of qi.
Yes.
Right? Qi in Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. In Indian medicine, they call it prana. And what these words really mean is that there is an immaterial life energy, a life breath, so to speak, that's flowing behind the physical being. And the physical body is merely building out the physical condensed form of what that inner energy qi is expressing. If that inner energy qi is expressing in balance and in harmony without distortion, then there's physical health. If it's distorted, and the distortions typically are caused by a misconception in the mind about itself in the universe, that's what distorts the qi, is a way of the mind is thinking about itself in a situation. And if that becomes fixed, it starts to create a bigger and bigger distortion in that flow, and then eventually manifests in changes in blood flow, thickening or thinning of the tissues in the body, ultimately developing more and more destructive pathologies.
Right. Okay. So the homeopathic medicine, how does it neutralize that?
We actually access that energy vibration by what we call diluting and succussing the remedies. And this is the area where modern science gets really hung up on homeopathy, because they cannot conceptualize that there's anything beyond atoms and molecules. We take a substance, let's say a tincture of a flower, and scientists can understand tincture of a flower. It has a chemical in it. Well, we'll take that and we'll start diluting it with alcohol, water solutions, and we pound it like bam, bam, pound it on a book 100 times and dump it out, leaving only maybe a little bit left, and then fill it back up with more of the water alcohol solution. And we'll keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million times, till by all scientific standards, there's no atom or molecule of the original substance left. But Hahnemann identified that what is left is a signature of the vital essence of that substance. It is a energy frequency. And if you give that energy frequency to the person who's suffering a disturbance in their own vital force, if it's similar, that layer of energy frequency must match the layer of that chi or that prana. It must be of the same refinement in order to generate a healing reaction. And that's kind of what when we talk about homeopathy potencies. You've heard they say in homeopathy, less is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So the higher the potency goes, the more diluted and succussed it is. But the deeper into the energy, the more refined, the higher the frequency, it goes into the vital force. So if a low potency would be like at a frequency of like this, then if you go to a 1M, it's way up here. It's real high. And the higher you go, the closer to the mind you get. So a person who comes in with very physical symptoms, you would give them a lower potency, affecting at a lower frequency of the prana. And that would generate a more physical, more physically localized action. If a person comes in with big mental things going on, like, they can't get unstuck out of their mind of seeing themselves as always being in a battle with everybody in life. I'm always in a battle with everybody. It's like I'm a knight on the battlefield and I'm always having to fight. And they can't get out of that way of seeing themselves. Then you go to a much higher potency.
Very interesting. Now, just to let everyone know, I asked David in the beginning of the show, when we were not live yet, if he can do a series with me on this, because this is obviously a huge topic. So he agreed. So there you go. I have seen, before we go to specific conditions, you talk to us about what succussing does and all this. Well, why is it that homeopathy is not being seen by the medical field as a form of therapy? I mean, a part of the allopathic therapy.
It's a very good question. And I don't want to shock anybody, but the reality is that here in the United States, we live in an information bubble. And a lot of things are not, a lot of ideas and conceptualizations and things going on in the world are not really allowed. If you leave the United States, even if you add the whole world together, homeopathy is the second most used form of medicine in the world. And if you leave the United States, you go to places in Europe or India, they even include it in their national healthcare systems. It's not unknown around the world, and it's used by millions and millions of people successfully all over the world, but it is completely suppressed in the United States by the medical industrial monopolies. And they have funded groups and people and private organizations to do nothing but slander and smear homeopathy in order to suppress the threat to their bottom line. They don't make their money on curing patients. And the goal of homeopathy is to bring out permanent and lasting healing changes. It's not to create permanent treatment addicts.
With homeopathy, instead of curing it fast, kind of open up the layers like an onion. And when you're busy trying to survive in this world, of course, that will be a little bit of a challenge for most of us. So how does your patients cope with this? And how do you see, what is your advice for people who are wanting homeopathic medicine?
In the framework of your question, the first thing that comes to my mind is the very important pillar of homeopathy, which is the law of individuation. Everybody's different. Each individual, no matter what the name of their disease, is going to need the remedy that fits them as an individual, and their path to healing is going to be unique to them. There are some general rules or guidelines, that you can kind of expect in homeopathy, but some people, many people, it's the same remedy, the same medicine. They need it for many, many, many years. And you don't get to underlying layers. They're healing from one very dense, very heavy layer, and they're getting better. Some people are like onions, and you peel away, and there's another remedy state underneath it. You need to use multiple remedies to keep moving them towards cure. Some people can come in and take one remedy, and it lifts them up, and they're within a week or 2 weeks, they feel great, and they stay that way for the rest of their lives until they get really old and worn out. And then there are other people who you got to work with them. Their diseases are very complicated. They're very dense. They've been taking a lot of drugs and allopathic medications to suppress the diseases, and you have to lift all of that, and it takes a lot more time. But what is the alternative? Quick suppression of the symptoms so you can get back to work, so that you can grow sicker and sicker and more dependent until finally you're dysfunctional, you're in all terrible pain, and you're bankrupt? Or do you want to do the real healing work now and lift that from you gradually? Let's say it's a pretty serious condition and it's going to take 6 months or a year to lift you up out of that. Is it better to do something that actually brings about real healing, that doesn't cost a lot of money, and take charge of your own healing path?
There's no choice, really. I'm going
to be a long-term thinker, because the other choice is that you go in with a problem, you get a drug, the drug gives you another problem on top of the problem you have, then you take more of that drug, and then you take drugs to deal with the diseases that the drugs are giving you, and it's a constant, verifiable, measurable path slide down toward a very unhappy old age.
Right. Short-term healing. So you mentioned something about the patient being the proactive self-healer. I like that, because I see us as the responsible individual that is eventually going to heal our own disease. As it, like for me, for example, I was diagnosed with cancer 2008, and I say today that cancer is my best friend, because through having cancer, I was able to look at my fears and so many different things, and was able to forgive a lot of them. So would you tell us more about this, and what the role of homeopathy is, and what the role of the person, the self-healer, is?
Very often, it's a fundamental mind shift. One of my teachers, when I was in homeopathy school, was one of the first, maybe even the first day of school, and he gets up and he says, "You're going to treat a lot of people, and some of them aren't going to get better, and some of them are going to get better right away, and some of them are going to struggle with getting better. And he said the fundamental thing that you're going to notice between those who get better and those who don't get better is that the ones who don't get better always blame external things for their condition. And, you know, it was the pollen that did it to me. It was my spouse who did it to me. It was the government that did it to me. It was, you know, and I'm the victim. And you can give them a remedy and they will lift their symptoms and they will get better. But eventually that same process of blaming outside things and giving away their power, they don't use that opportunity to make the changes in their own way of viewing themselves in their mind. A person who's a proactive self-healer somewhere at least says, somehow or another, this disease is an expression of something that's imbalanced within myself. And I know this, and I don't blame others. I know that there's something here that within myself. And if you can get yourself to that part, to that mentality, at least somehow or another, this my homeopath called it the law of providence. Somehow or another, you get guided to those things that are going to help you do your own self-healing. You get guided to those practitioners who have the knowledge and the skills to help you help yourself. And so what happens when a self-healer gets a good remedy and that problem lifts and abates, the density and momentum of that energy disturbance lifts. There's a, you know, I can change. I can actually see this pattern that I've been going down now. They can see it as a separate thing running instead of identifying with it. And I can see that, and I don't have to choose to follow that pattern in these situations.
Right. You gave us an example before of the bee having a sound of its own. I can understand that. What about the plants?
Yeah, everything has a sound. You can't hear it.
Okay.
Because the human senses are very limited. We hear and see in a very narrow spectrum. And before anything comes into form, solid form that we perceive with our very limited senses, there is a sound behind it. You know, and animals are good. Animals are good to use as an example because we can hear a representation of that invisible sound in the type of sound the animal makes. Dogs bark, cows go moo, you know, they have a sound. They have a fixed sound. And behind all the way back into an unfixed sound, beyond your perception is a sound that's following that same kind of pattern. And that form is an expression of that sound. And so flowers are an expression of a certain sound, a certain quality of sensitivity, a certain quality of reactivity. A thorn has a certain quality of beauty, as you know. It's kind of like a flower, you know, they're kind of there. They don't have the volition that an animal does to move around. So they have a certain sensitivity and reactivity to the environment, a certain, like a thorn, you know, it's developed a certain reaction, right? Be pricky if you grab it, you know, it's a certain expression. And like a pulsatilla, which is a very common remedy in homeopathy, the wind flower. It's not very firm, and it flops around in the wind like this, and it vibrates and it shakes, and it has these little hairs, and it's very sensitive and sits in sandy soil and doesn't feel real solid and stable. And so any people who need this flower are very, very sensitive, and they feel they need somebody to support them, and they want a lot of sympathy, and they want to be, you know, look, I'm pretty, don't step on me. This whole pattern will connect when you're taking a case.
So I always see this word miasm in homeopathy.
Correct pronunciation is miasm.
Oh, sorry, miasm.
Miasm.
Okay. It's when I play with the sound of this, it sounds like myself as me. So tell us more about that.
The founder of homeopathy, Samuel Hahnemann, he was a Christian who, you know, kind of a metaphysical Christian, and, you know, grew up in Germany. You know, he's from Germany in the Renaissance time, which was a Christian culture and very steeped in the idea of original sin, you know, and this kind of mythology, you know, about, you know, the origins of human nature. And so he had to use that kind of language in order to explain the causes of disease. And the miasm is a word he came up with to to describe the inherent disturbance, the inherent pace and disturbance of a human being who comes in with, quote, sin, that we all come in with inherited predisposition. And that predisposition kind of is at the underlying roots of the diseases we're going to have in life. And he called that the miasms. And he identified those miasms with, particularly with the venereal diseases, syphilitic miasm. He called a psychotic miasm, which is spelled different. It does not the psychological psychotic miasm, but it basically was the gonorrhea miasm. And then he identified what we now call inflammatory autoimmune conditions. He called psoric miasm, which was the eternal itch, that inflammation and itch. So he said that this was kind of like the underlying miasmatic taint of the entire human race. And so in homeopathy, the remedies represent these miasms. They represent them into the degree of destructiveness of the pathology. For instance, our arsenic is a deadly poison, creates a lot of destruction. And so, that's kind of like toward the syphilitic miasm. Whereas something like sulfur, which just causes a lot of itching and stinking, is more in what he would call psoric miasm. And it was important that the miasmatic intensity of the remedy must match the miasmatic intensity of the patient, as well as the symptoms matching, in order to get the best cure.
Thank you. So the way I see it is, I, as an individual, I have some dis-ease in my mind because I'm judging people, and I know I'm doing that, and sometimes I have guilt that I'm doing that and stuff like that, right? Of course, I release it through self-forgiveness. But my question is, how do you see that mental dis-ease together with physical disease eventually manifest as a social disease? And how does homeopathy look at this?
Hahnemann was very clear, and James Tyler Kent, one of our great masters from the 19th century, was a very, very, very clear and wrote extensively in homeopathic philosophy. What happens on the physical plane is the effect. It is not the cause. Society is not a cause, it is an effect. Society is a mental conceptualization. We say all individuals getting through life together, and if we look at the whole thing, we call this a society. If the life, the mind are disturbed, that internal miasmatic taint goes on, then it's going to manifest as changes at the physical level, changes in the body, changes. And you're going to see it manifesting as a disorderly, disruptive, sick, chaotic society. And so Hahnemann and Kent were very clear. You want to change society, and just like all the spiritual teachers say, change yourself. Because that's the only thing that you can do. Your own sickness, your own miasmatic taint, so to speak, your own disturbance is manifesting in your behavior with your fellow human beings. You can't control society because all those individuals, all those people, and all their problems are beyond your control, but you can heal yourself. And by healing yourself, that reverberates through all of society.
Right. So let me expand this more. The mind disease becomes a physical disease, becomes a social disease, and eventually what happens is it creates a consequence that eventually affects the individual again, and then it impulses the mind to again develop or experience disease. Because
the way I always teach my patients to see that or look at that is, don't look as the environment is causing your disease. Look at it as the mirror of your disease.
Very cool. Yes, exactly.
And when I'm taking cases, and the mind plays a lot of funny tricks on itself. And one of the things is the ego always wants to believe that it's right, always wants to believe that it's okay. And so it has very elaborate methods of denying the disturbance. And so when I'm talking to patients, I'm almost always dealing with that mental process. I do it, you do it, we all do it. But when I have to find out what the real disturbance is, I have to have the techniques and the skills to get underneath that block, that process. And so a lot of times a person can't really, when I say, tell me about how you are when you're afraid, and they can't really tell me, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid. And then they'll start telling, my mom was always the most frightened person. Really? Tell me about how frightened your mom was. And then their mom mirroring back that quality of fear, because that's all they see is themselves, is filtering through their own mind. Everything they'll tell me about their scared mom is their own fear. And then I use that as if though they were talking about themselves. And that's how I find the remedy.
That is cool, David, because when we forgive ourselves also, we use self-forgiveness as a tool. And whenever I see my mom doing something that I don't like, I put it back to myself and forgive myself for that. So in a way, homeopathy is kind of like forgiving yourself for things that you have done that then is now in your environment, and you put it back to yourself and say, okay, let's stop this. So another word that I see is proving. Now, I know
Proving?
that proving, yeah.
Proving the remedies, yeah.
Yeah. Please enlighten us on that.
Well, proving is where we actually apply the Western scientific method. It has an application, and in homeopathy. In fact, homeopathy was kind of one of the first areas that started using this double-blind study kind of method. So in a proving, what we do is we get, like, say, 100 people. We make a low potency remedy out of some substance that we haven't yet put in our materia medica, and we give that remedy to them without them knowing it. Well, I mean, without them knowing what it is. They know they're provers, that's all. And so they take this low potency and they keep taking it every hour till they start to get symptoms that are not normal for them. And then there's managers who watch the proving who don't know what the remedy is, and each one will handle one of the provers and record all the symptoms. And then all of that will get compiled, and then up the chain, they'll study all of that information, and they'll see what very strong common threads keep running through all these provers from taking this. Like, did every single prover have dreams of snakes? And if half of the provers had dreams of snakes, or did a lot of the provers feel a sharp stabbing pain in their left eyeball? It goes all the way down to that level of detail. And things that were shared in common that kept reoccurring are considered to be symptoms of that substance, symptoms of that remedy. And those go down and they go into the materia medica. And then those symptoms become symptoms that we use to match to patients who come in with their particular symptoms. And that's called a proving.
Okay, thank you. How did Hahnemann ended up discovering homeopathy?
He was the super genius who spoke 14 languages, and he was trained in all of this, like bleeding and leeching and purging and all this stuff that they did. And he, had the thought that surely this is not the way it was meant to be. This can't possibly be so. And he started going through and he started reading cases and through history going way back, ancient Roman times, and started seeing substances and cured cases, and he started to notice a theme there. And I think, if I remember, because my memory's not real clear on this one, but I think that he noted that cinchona bark produced a very similar kind of fever and symptoms that malaria did. He noticed there was a very strong similarity between these two, and he experimented, and he found that people who had this kind of periodic fever with all the rigors and the chills, and he tried cinchona bark, and he noticed it cured them. And it's like, you know, it was like, yeah, you know, it's the similarness of these things that are working. And these weren't even diluted or succussed at the time. They were just tinctures. And so then he started researching it along those lines, and he started finding more and more and more that the similar is what was curing. And then as he continued on, he started realizing that weaker and weaker and weaker doses, as long as they closely matched the symptoms, could generate a reaction of healing without poisoning the body. And it kept on going till he figured out diluting and succussing and energy and vitally, just step by step, it just became more and more clear to him.
So another thing is this similar. It says rather than the same, it's saying similar in terms
Correct.
of, yeah. So can you please enlighten us on that?
The disturbance in the vital force needs to recognize, it needs to recognize something external from itself in order to generate a reaction. So if person, let's say they got poison ivy, you generally wouldn't give poison ivy rust tox to a person who has poison ivy, because their vital force is already identified with the poison ivy, and so there's not enough of a difference to create a shift in direction of awareness, so to speak. It's like it's the same thing. It's the same thing the sensation is identified with, so it doesn't really know to generate a reaction to it. But if it's very, very close, but not exactly the same, the vital force, react. Like, I got to react to that.
Right. Okay. Cool. So what about why use distilled water rather than plain water? And why use ethanol?
Well, no, we don't use.
I mean,
alcohol.
alcohol.
Alcohol is just a preservative
Okay.
in a conveyor. You know, it's and you know, you're just using distilled water, you're using purified water because you just don't want to take the risk that there's anything in that water that could disturb the action of the remedy or the action of the person's vital force or the healing reaction. It's the same common sense kind of stuff in anything else. You know, alcohol is a preservative. Does it just only preserve stuff, like you can put a tincture and preserve that tincture for years and years. It also preserves energy patterns. When water holds energy patterns, and alcohol preserves them. So it's just a preservative.
Why 50%?
Well, you know, that's the idea. It depends on how long you want the solution, you know, to work. 50% is going to last a long, long time. It's going to last longer than 10%.
Okay. Also, I heard one homeopathic doctor say that you will have to take this drop once a month. Otherwise, you lose the efficacy of it if you don't do that. You know, let me just correct myself and say, what do you why does it have to be in so many for it to be able to be effective, rather than just take it once and that's it?
Well, again, we have to go back to that law of individuation. Everybody's not the same. Some people need to take some remedy every day. Some people once in 6 months. It depends on the density, the momentum of the disease, the age of the patient, the amount of vital force they have. The tendency is the more physical the problem is, the more frequently you take the remedy. The more mental, the less frequently you take it. The remedy doesn't have any chemical action upon the body. So once it touches your tongue, it has had an energetic effect upon your vital force. And once that has happened, that's it. Everything else after that is your vital force reaction to the remedy. And that reaction to the remedy can go on for weeks, it can go on for months, and you generally don't repeat a remedy until that action has stopped.
Okay. I also heard, or yeah, I heard, I looked at some videos, and they're saying homeopathy came from Ayurvedic medicine. Is that true, or is that just
No. Mm-mm. Ayurveda, as far as I can tell, doesn't have anything to do with the law of simillimum. I'm not an Ayurvedic expert. I've studied its principles, and there is a lot of vitalism in it, going back into yoga and prana and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of using something that generates similar symptoms at an energetic level, diluting succussing substances, and I've not seen that anywhere in Ayurveda. Hahnemann's more of his stuff actually came from studying ancient Roman and ancient Greek medicine.
oh
Even the witches and the folk healers and things like that. He studied all of that. He was very Western oriented in his studies.
okay? What about mental disease? Have you had a patient having schizophrenia, and what is your treatment protocol for this?
I haven't had schizophrenia, but I've had a lot of very severe depression, suicidal depression, anxiety, panic attacks, bipolar. Schizophrenics in the West don't usually ever make it to the homeopath. They're sequestered away and put on heavy medications, and they're not allowed under the thumb of the psychiatric treatment. But I have a lot of success with mental cases, and in homeopathy, we don't view that physical disease and mental disease are two different things. At the root of every physical disease is a mental disturbance, and a mental disease is merely the mental aspect of that disease manifesting without the physical disturbance. And it's just the rain or the plane in which it's manifesting. So let's take homeopathic remedy arsenicum album. If a person comes in with, say, real bad stomach pain and they're vomiting and it's burning pain, but they want to drink hot tea anyway, that makes them feel better, and they're full of chills and they're crying for somebody to help them, and they won't leave people alone, and it's very physical, and they feel very anxious about it all. We would give them arsenicum album, low potency, and that would generate a healing reaction. Say a person comes in and they're convinced in their mind that robbers are going to break in their house, and they have to have everything absolutely perfectly ordered and wear perfect clothes, and they're always anxious all the time, and that's in a mental state, paranoid, what we call paranoid, and very paranoid. It's the same disease, but on a different level or a different plane. They're going to get a high potency of arsenicum album.
So you can see people for depression and anxiety and panic attacks.
Well, legally, I see people and help people who suffer from these conditions. Okay. I can't say I treat them. I see them for them, because that would be a violation of the monopoly on medical language.
How can someone monopolize language? That is something.
They call it privileged speech.
Wow. That is, sound is sound. I mean, words, how can you monopolize sound? But anyway, what about Tourette syndrome? What is your...
Well, we know right away that Tourette syndrome, is a nervous system disturbance. But everybody who has Tourette syndrome doesn't need the same remedy or remedies. You have to look for what's characteristic. So like any other case, if somebody has Tourette syndrome, they're going to come to my office, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk for 2 hours, and we're going to look for characteristic patterns. Characteristic patterns will be the sensations inside of the spasms, the kind of issues that trigger them. Like some people might be triggered in a certain kind of relationship situation. Some people might be triggered in a work situation. Some people might be triggered by a grief or a loss. You look and see what the triggers are unique to that kind of person. You look at the person's, life, the traumas they've been through in life, and see how that's all related. You look at their dreams, their fears. You try to you're looking to see what is the overall pattern that's expressing is that nervous disruption, and then you match it with a remedy that has that same kind of disruption.
So now I can see that it's not actually the name of the disease that matters. It's actually the whole person that you are wanting to interview, and so
Right.
that you can, yeah.
That's what makes marketing homeopathy really hard, is because we've been conditioned to think of diseases as things that need to be treated, instead of thinking of diseases as merely expressions of a being that needs to be treated. And so you know, you can't go on and say homeopathy for arthritis. You know, you might find some articles and stuff and cleverly worded and things like that. But in order to present homeopathy, but there isn't any homeopathic remedy for arthritis, or homeopathic remedy for Tourette syndrome, or homeopathic remedy for migraine headaches. There is the homeopathic remedy that fits you. Headaches, arthritis, Tourette syndrome, whatever it is an expression of the disturbance that's going on within your own vital force. So we have to find that specific remedy that matches you as an individual.
Cool. Very cool. So sciatica is a physical condition. And
Maybe.
yeah, of course, as you said, which I also agree, and every physical condition stems from mental condition. Now, how do you see people with scoliosis or sciatica problems? I mean,
scoliosis is a congenital problem, and homeopathy doesn't change congenital. There's a limit to homeopathy. There's a proper time and place for, you know, most healing modalities, whatever they are. And congenital changes aren't really it's not the appropriate treatment. If you're born with one arm, homeopathy isn't going to restore an arm. If you're born with scoliosis, you know, these like deep congenital things, they're going to have to be dealt with by mechanical means. Doesn't mean that there's not a mental component that there can't be helped homeopathically, but the physical thing is not going to be helped with a homeopathic remedy. Sciatica can rise from quite a number of different conditions. You talked about an exercise injury. So you had an injury, a mechanical injury. So in that particular case, even though there is a mental state, you were trying to do a whole lot of sit-ups for whatever reason, whatever that motive was, but it was a mechanical injury. And so going to a chiropractor could be a very appropriate treatment for a mechanical injury. Whereas for me, I've been going to a chiropractor. I didn't mention that with my problem. I've been going for a year, and it would give me a day of relief, and that was about it, because I had degenerating discs, and all the you know, cracking on my back in the world wasn't going to stop that degeneration. So you have to look at the appropriate flow of cause and effect when you're choosing a modality. And what was the cause of the inflammation? You know, well, you know, the autoimmune disease, I had to, you know, through treatment, became aware that one part of my mind was at war with another part of my mind. And there was a lot of anger and a lot of lack of acceptance of certain aspects of my own mind. And that manifests in the body as the immune system, one part of the body attacking another part of the body. And it was an issue about will, an issue about performance, an issue about structure, the spine to stand up straight in life, you know, and be able to handle the pressure. And I was under all this pressure right from my work, and trying to stand up and be like, you know, like, you know, the strong knight in armor, you know, standing against all the pressure. And my mind, this whole story was going on. And as that lifted, and the body and the problem in the spine lifted, I was able to get back to, you know, to the degree of freedom that I could live a creative life.
if I had an accident and then I need surgery for my limbs, I go to the doctor. But when can homeopathy and allopathic medicine come together? And
right now, I got one of my little nieces. She broke her ankle, And so, we have good first aid remedies for injuries and bone breaks and things like that. But she had to go to the doctor and she had to get the bone set and get it put in a cast. And in the meantime, she's taking first aid homeopathic remedies that are going to result in reduced swelling and rapid bone healing.
Yeah, commonsensical.
That's an example. Some people, like you mentioned, cancer. Some people have cancer, and if they don't get surgery, they're not gonna make it. And homeopathy is not going to turn that around. And so, but we can treat them for the side effects of chemotherapy if they're suffering from the side effects of chemotherapy, and we can work on removing the underlying cancer miasmatic taint so that they don't have a reoccurrence of the cancer. Because that tends to be what happens when people attack cancer cells, is they just kind of like ants in an ant pile, they kind of scatter and they go to different areas. And so, unless the cancer miasm is healed, cancer is going to reoccur, period.
Okay. Have you had patients suffering from, again, I would word this according to the normal way we label diseases, but in essence, I know exactly why diseases are here, is to help us become the self-healers that we are. But have you seen patients with OCD or people with obsessive compulsive disorders or addictions, and how was your experience with that?
Well, obsessive compulsive disorder is very, very well represented in our remedies. And so, those are some of the best symptoms that we are able to use to find accurate remedies that generate a total healing reaction. Individuation. Some people are obsessive and compulsive about the order of books and pictures and things on the wall, right? Some people are obsessive about cleanliness and wash their hands, 100 times a day. And some people are obsessed about their hair and their clothes. And, some are obsessed that their kids become super performers and super successful. And, and each one of these is a different remedy, is a different medicine, so to speak. And so, you look at those and you apply them, and you'll see that obsessive compulsive, that need to control outward things because the inner state feels so chaotic. You'll see that abate, and peace and freedom return to the mind.
So what happened to that sciatica? It just disappeared and then it did not come again?
The sciatica disappeared for a number of years, long time, 10 years, till 2004. And I was doing a camel pose in yoga, and I ruptured a disc, mechanical injury. But believe it or not, I cured that with a homeopathic remedy. Chiropractor couldn't help. Nothing could help. I was, it'd been going on. My homeopath had gone out of country to France, and I just started homeopathic school, and I was in agony, and this was like really bad agony because it was a sudden accident, mechanical injury. And then, I just went on for like 3 months, and I thought my life was over. And I was looking through the books, what could help me, what could help me, what could help me. And I was looking, and I saw, one of the remedies said sulfur for sciatica. And I took like sulfur, little low potency sulfur. And it was like my whole body did this and then suddenly these rashes broke up all down the side of my body, and then down on my feet and my hands, real itchy rashes like poison ivy. And then 80% of the pain was gone in 5 minutes. I mean, that's sudden. That's how fast and acute homeopathy can work, and then went on to heal.
Wow. So how much do you charge if for example, I would like to see you, and how much do I expect to pay? And do you see people through Skype or just face-to-face?
It's best to see face-to-face in person, but cases can be successfully done on Skype. Looking at facial expressions and hand gestures are very important when taking a homeopathic case. Beware of homeopaths who try to figure out your remedy by filling out questionnaires. And because, that kind of homeopathy doesn't lead you anywhere. There's different kinds of cases. There's chronic and acute and simple acute. Simple acute cases, like a little injury, something like that, I charge, $75. It's like, you fell down, you got a bad bruise and swelling. If it's like a flu, and you've got a bad flu with a bad fever, and it's $150. And that, I don't keep charging you if the first remedy doesn't work. What I do is I find several remedies, and we work with those remedies until one does work, and I don't charge you again until the acute is resolved. And then there's the chronic cases. In chronic cases, we spend a couple of hours in the initial consultation. It's a very deep investigation. I charge $300, and then follow-ups once per month until I see improvement. It's $150.
Okay.
Remedies are usually included unless I have to order liquid mode, and that's $25.
What's the difference between liquid remedies and the one in sugar pills?
Well, that's a hard one to technically explain. The best way is to use a metaphor. The little pills are more like nukes, and you hit it, pow, it hits the vital force, and then there's a big reaction that flows out of that. Liquid mode remedies are they're like just little bullets, and they just kind of tap on the vital force every day. You take it every day. You dilute and succuss your own remedy. And generally, the way you do that is if the person's got a pretty good vitality and they're not taking a lot of medication suppressing, you would give them a dry potency. But if they're very weak and it's been very progressive and very chronic and very degenerate and their vital force is low, they're taking medications, then you need to do the liquid mode and peck at it every day. It's more gentle and it can get underneath the medications that they're taking.
Cool. So you do Skype consultations. Yeah. So wherever you are in the world, if you have Skype, they can actually consult with you.
Yes.
Cool. Very cool. And you have a website that's got a
website. Yeah. Homeopathydallas.com.
Right. And I went there and I saw this video explaining homeopathy, which is really cool. But that is a very simple explanation of what it is. And anything you would like to say in closing?
Just to reiterate what we talked about earlier, what are your choices when you come down with a chronic illness? Do you want the quick relief, short-term gain for long-term pain, or do you want to do the real work of healing the problem and use a method that's actually going to help you heal yourself over the long run so that you don't end up dependent on medical authorities and medications and surgeries? And think about that.
Thank you.